Welcome to the program. I'm Roby Brock. Thank you for joining us for our end of the year review of Arkansas politics. Joining us today will be Rex Nelson of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and former State Senator Joyce Elliott of Get Loud, Arkansas. What are some of the topics that we plan to examine? Well, here's a little bit of what happened this past year. The LEARNS Act passed and an effort to repeal it failed. Controversies involving prison beds, the Buffalo River, and a $19,000 lectern dominated the news cycles. The Freedom of Information law was under attack, and an advocacy group across the political spectrum has banded together to enshrine it in the Constitution. There could be other ballot initiatives for consideration in 2024, as well as high-profile races for Congress and the Arkansas Supreme Court. Finally, turmoil in Congress with the ouster of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, an impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden, and the presidential race with former President Donald Trump leading the GOP ticket despite his legal helter-skelter. Rex Nelson and Joyce Elliott join me after the break for a half-hour discussion on these topics and more. Stay with us. All right, time to talk politics. Joining me now, Joyce Elliott, former state senator, head of Get Loud, Arkansas. Rex Nelson, who gets loud all the time, particularly on the radio, with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, senior editor. Thank you both for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let's dive into the year in review here. Man, we've had a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's begin with really the hottest controversy in Arkansas right now, and that involves the Corrections Board. As we are taping, as we are talking, litigation flying back and forth everywhere. But at its root, the governor wants more control over what happens in the correction system in the state of Arkansas. The Constitution seemingly gives that to the Corrections Board. You're a former state senator, Joyce.
Yes.
Where do you see the power struggle in this?
Well, I see a power struggle in that a lot of people think of Amendment 33. They think of the Highway Department. They think of the U of A. Where we kind of understand they have some separate autonomous powers, from the governor and others. But I think we've never had this uncovered or thought about it when it came to the Department of Corrections.
Because generally there's been cooperation.
It's been cooperation.
Past, yeah.
That's exactly right. So I think there's a power struggle where there really should not be one, because to suggest that the board does not care about the safety of the state, I think is just over the top. And all of this could be resolved if we sat down and looked at, okay, what do we really need to do in this state and to make sure people are safer and that we're doing what we should do in our system, is stop doing the things we've always done. And there's more crackdown from the governor on, I want more beds. Okay, so you do, and then the board comes along and says that would be irresponsible to do. We're not prepared to do it. We don't have the personnel. And to have a fight over something that is that clearly cut, it's just to make up something, I think. But it seems to me, though, if we want a winner, and I hate looking at it that way, I think the board is doing its job. And I'm pretty surprised that they are, but I'm glad they are.
They are pushing back strongly.
Pushing
Rex,
back.
You've been in rooms before where governors have knocked skulls with other members of the executive branch of government. Why is that not happening here?
Let me kind of talk about what is undergirding this issue and every issue we're going to talk about without sounding too much like a political scientist. But this is the difference between governing in the old-fashioned way. Governors used to run their campaign, then they would go into governing mode, and a continuous campaign. And what our governor now does is runs a continuous campaign. And campaigns are based on conflict, because conflict raises money. Your donors send in donation. You look at the makeup of our governor's staff, it is mainly political consultants. These are people who really don't care, frankly, about public policy. They may not care about Arkansas that much. And so we have a very different way of governing in Arkansas than we have seen in our lifetime, because we had about 50 to 60 years of moderate, pragmatic governors. That has ended. It's all about controversy now. So we're going to see that on this issue and a lot of other issues over the next 3 years.
So let's talk about some of the other issues that we've dealt with over this past year that have been embroiled in controversy. The LEARNS Act is one that comes to mind, huge fight in the state. Regular session, and subsequently there was a group that tried to repeal it, which I'm hard-pressed to remember a time in Arkansas history. I know there was an attempt to repeal the soft drink tax,
Yes.
but it wasn't right on the heels of a legislative session
No,
like
not coming
that.
right out of the session.
What do we make of where we are with the LEARNS Act right now? Is it status quo in terms of its implementation? Do you still think that there are groups out there that are going to push for some sort of repeal over the next year?
I know as an educator, Senator Elliott is going to agree with me on this, but education is always going to be the biggest issue in any legislative session because it's the biggest part of our budget. And legislative sessions are about the budget. So education will be ongoing. Those who thought we're going to pass the LEARNS Act, it's going to be a panacea, we're not going to have to address this again, well, that's not the way it works. And I thought the fundamental problem about LEARNS from day one was it was crafted outside of Arkansas. It's a national template. Again, you talk about running a continuous campaign. There are right-wing organizations who draw up draft legislation. We've seen dozens of them introduced in Arkansas in recent years, and it really didn't have that much Arkansas input from the start. We didn't hear from administrators. We didn't hear from classroom teachers, and because of that, it's going to be an ongoing debate, I think.
Oh, it is, and the day the LEARNS Act was run in the House session, I think it was. I'd never seen that many teachers show up that early, almost before the sun came up, prepared to take a day off school, do whatever they needed to do to testify. And they honestly thought that their voices were going to make a difference. And they sat there, they testified. I was there until like 9 o'clock with everybody else. And it seems not a single thing that any teacher said had made any difference. And the problem we have with this bill is it is something that's just superimposed in Arkansas. You cannot, and I have for years said this through Democratic and Republican administrations, you cannot come in and keep calling yourself the education governor and have some bill that's just going to change everything. It needs to be something that is transformational, that includes the people in the state, talking to people, talking to educators. And Lord knows we can do it. We just will not do it because everybody uses education as something that's going to, I suppose, give them a legacy that they want. Or in this case, I think in this case with this governor, it's just pump me to the next level. Wherever I'm going, education was supposed to be a part of the ticket. And it has done exactly what anybody looking at what's going on with education in the state, it has done exactly what people predicted, and that is it has infuriated every little hamlet in the state, every one of them.
Yeah, there's some groups though that are positive about aspects of the LEARNS Act.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I've traveled to different parts of the state and had people that are very excited about the input into like early childhood reading. There's some more school safety funding that's in there. So there are some aspects of LEARNS that are
but here's
positive.
the problem. Yeah, there absolutely are. And that's the problem with trying to fashion an education bill that should be something that's good for the next 20, 30 years. If we don't ever sit down and do that, we're forever going to have this a la carte type of education. Because we did not do that, and nobody ever does, seemingly, we end up with pieces that are good. I mean, if I were to look at my body right now, parts of me are doing okay. but
I'd be hard pressed on my end, but
yeah,
for me.
But that doesn't mean everything is okay. And then in a serious way, we had the opportunity with a brand new governor, we could place ourselves in a position of competing worldwide. Because as I've said before, even on this show, we are not at a time when we need to try to compete with Texas or Oklahoma, anybody else in this country. We need to compete worldwide. Yeah. We set ourselves way back.
All right, we've got to take a quick commercial break. I want to come back and talk about some other year in politics with Joyce Elliott and Rex Nelson. I'm Roby Brock. We're back right after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm joined by Rex Nelson and Joyce Elliott. We're reviewing the year in politics. We really couldn't do a show about politics in Arkansas if we didn't talk about LecterGate or PodiumGate or whatever we're going to talk about, which to me seemed like a pretty silly controversy when it began, and then it just festered for months, and we're still dealing with it because it's under an audit right now. Rex, as a person who understands political messaging, how did this not get taken care of and nipped in the bud?
It comes back to secrecy. I mean, there is just in this governor's office, everything has to be shrouded. It has to be secret. You know, we once had a U.S. Supreme Court justice saying the best disinfectant is sunlight. And I have always believed that as a journalist. I believed it as somebody who worked in government and worked in the governor's office also. But there's this secrecy, and there's also a paranoia that I find that surrounds this office. So you combine secrecy and paranoia, that's a pretty bad combination. And that's what we had from the start. Instead of making this a 1-2 day story saying, all right, here's how we messed up, explain it fully. A, B, C, D, here are the steps. Shouldn't have done it. We're suspending state employee A, and the state party's paying for it. Taxpayers aren't out any money. End of story.
Yeah, still 8 weeks later, we're still dealing with it.
Yeah.
But this also folds into the Freedom of Information Act changes that we saw in the special session. Now there is a potential ballot initiative to incorporate that into the Constitution, as well as an initiated act in there. Do you think that that group will successfully get on the ballot next year?
I think the group will get on the ballot next year because I have to say, for this state to be animated by LecterGate is the most surprising thing I've seen in a long time.
It caught me off guard. I was like, what?
At first I thought, why are people making such a big deal of this? Obviously somebody bought a lectern. People use lecterns. And then here we are after all this time, and Rex says, I agree completely. It's only because a lack of transparency. Just say what happened, and all of us make mistakes, and and all of us from time to time would say, well, I blew that one. To have said that, we would not be talking about LecterGate at this point, and now here we are. I think the group will be successful, and all of this animated by something that just did not have to be. Once again, it's like we're going to go into our corner, and we're going to fight our way out, do everything except what we should do. It's kind of like we'll try everything else before we're doing the right thing. This is how it strikes me.
All right, another potential ballot issue in 2024 will center around the issue of abortion. It has gone back for a second reading from the Attorney General's office to see if it will qualify for its ballot title. This would be the states' rights, basically. I think they want to put some exceptions into the law for life of the mother, rape and incest, and some other things like that. What do you make of the chances of that getting on the ballot next year, and what could that do in terms of political enthusiasm for different groups in Arkansas on next year's ballots?
Well, I think for political enthusiasm, it would turn out more of what we traditionally think of, maybe what's left of the Democratic base in Arkansas, to come out on that issue.
And moderate Republicans?
Maybe some, but you look at polling, Roby, and Arkansas is still very strongly a pro-life state, pretty much across the board. So I think any chance of approval, if this is approved for the ballot, from a political standpoint, is very, very slim.
Yeah. What do you think, Joyce?
Well, we're gonna need to look back at this in a year, because I'm gonna predict you
Okay,
wrong.
good. Well, we had to disagree at least on something.
I do think you're wrong about that. I think that there are so many people, and I will say Republican women. This is kind of a women's thing in general, where maybe we talk about this state as a pro-life state, and we do it that way because we pass a lot of bills that, we shouldn't be passing, getting into people's business and so on, ranking. But what this does to women, in terms of not because they want to have an abortion, but because of the way women are being treated in this state, and because of the way families are being treated. I know Republican women, and I'm not going to suggest to you I know enough to say this is going to pass based on Republican women, but I know for women and families, we have crossed the Rubicon here on what we're doing, and getting into people's businesses where we cannot predict as legislators what we should do when it comes to women's health. And we talk about abortions, and people fail to remember abortion is part of health care for people as well. It's not something that women just do because they got up one morning and thought, oh, I'm not feeling good about this. I predict it will pass, and it will get on the ballot, I think. Although, seemingly everything we can throw up to keep it from getting there will happen. but I do believe it will pass because we're forgetting another demographic here, young women. I have no idea who these women were, but this is just a little anecdote. I was at a stop sign, and it was there were 2 lanes. These 2 women pulled up beside me. I have no idea who they are or anything. Rolled down their windows and started doing this for them. And their plea to me was, and I was in the legislature at the time, their plea to me was, please, 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 Miss Elliott, do something about making sure we have access to abortion in this state. I would guess they were 23, 24. People are not going to talk about it. People should not have to talk about their health care needs to convince the state that women have rights, we have autonomous bodies, and we don't, these kind of things we don't do to men. And I think women are at a point now where they have had enough.
I think that you might have filed a piece of legislation along with Judy Smith at one time to deal with vasectomies, I think, in the state of Arkansas, but that's a different issue. We got about a minute left here in this particular segment. We have a Supreme Court Chief Justice race next year that could be the wild, wild west. There's 4 people running, 3 of whom are on the Supreme Court right now. It's going to make for some interesting politics with the 2 losers.
Could be a lot of money spent in it, and could be the wild, wild west. The problem is most voters don't pay attention to judicial races. I mean, this could really be a thing where the person, I guess I'm pulling out my old inner Jerry Russell, the person with the best jingle might win this thing, because average voters don't really study judicial races, and it can come down to some very strange things sometimes when it comes to who wins a judicial race.
He went to jingles there. That's
Right.
hilarious. All right, we got to take one more commercial break. We're going to come back and do a final segment. We're going to talk a little bit on the national level with Rex Nelson and with Joyce Elliott. Stay with us. All right, Rex Nelson, Joyce Elliott talking politics here. At the national level, we're going to have a presidential race in 2024. My question to you first, Joyce, then Rex, how ugly is it going to be?
Oh, it frightens me thinking about how ugly it's going to be, because it's gotten so ugly just as of today. The rhetoric that we're seeing out there and the fact that people are accepting it and mouthing it. It stuns me to think we have dipped this low that we're willing to call each other names. We're willing to use words like vermin. We're willing to use words like we are contaminating the blood and this kind of thing. And I really am very, very concerned that we will drag ourselves even lower in this presidential race than we are now. This country deserves to be better and do better. We can all disagree, but we've come to a tipping point at this juncture where we need to stop and start talking to each other. I don't care who you are. Yeah. We cannot survive this. We have a democracy that I think is in trouble. And it is up to every one of us, rather than looking at somebody else. It's time for you to do something, you do something. This is on every single one of us. And if we have leaders who are going to use the language and do the things that they're doing right now, that's getting people all riled up, it's up to us to say, no, I'm not going down that road.
Is this going to be the election cycle that cleanses us from this scourge eventually?
I hope so. I hope so. The fever has to break at some point, because I agree with Senator Elliott. I think democracy is going to be in trouble if we keep down this road. I grew up as a guy who loved politics, even as a kid, reading about it. I got involved in campaigns at an early age. I became a political reporter at an early age, and I look now and I say, I never thought I would see the country come to this. Why would any young person be attracted to politics in this day and time?
And then we'll say, come do this.
Yeah.
You know, and we need them to. And I'm kind of like you, Rex. I grew up, we didn't have a TV, but we had the newspaper. My grandmother, we lived with my grandmother, and she subscribed to the Shreveport Times, for God's sake.
In Willisville, right?
Willisville. And I grew up really, it was I
know where Willisville is. I'm Southwest Arkansas boy.
I mean, but it was, I was just hyper fixated on politics because I couldn't exactly explain it all, but I knew it was really, really important. Yeah. And when I discovered, of course, this is why it matters, it was something that I wanted to be a part of and that I thought, and still do think that, you know, this is something we need to get right, because it's the way we've chosen to run our country.
Well, you grew up in the age of John F. Kennedy. Rex over here is with FDR, man. I mean, he goes way back. So,
Now, you know, really quickly, as you talk about, are we going to survive it? Is the fever going to break? As somebody who worked for a Republican governor, worked for a Republican president also, I'm at the point where I think the House is just going to have to burn down as far as the National Republican Party. The House is going to have to burn down next year and then turn around and start trying to rebuild something out of those ashes.
yeah. Well, it will be an interesting year in politics for us to watch. We got all this on tape, so we get to play this back and we get to see.
Oh, so you have good
exactly.
predictions.
We'll do that. Thank you both for being here. Happy holidays to
Thanks,
you both.
Roby.
I appreciate you. So,
Yeah.
and we appreciate everybody watching us throughout the course of this year as well too. It's been the 10th anniversary of Capitol View. Next year is the 25th anniversary of Talk Business and Politics, and we'll be doing a lot to recognize that. Hope that the rest of your holidays are good. I'm Roby Brock. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time.